Buck Winslow's elbows thrummed on the window ledge of his fire-green red race car, waiting for the green flag to wave. He had dreamed about this moment for weeks. The final race of the season, televised across the country, stadium packed to capacity. His pit crew kept glancing at him nervously, though. They knew something the audience didn't. Buck had a habit, some might call it a compulsion, that few could ever predict. He couldn't stop singing karaoke at the most inopportune times. When most drivers revved engines and focused on apexes and tire grip, Buck's mind drifted to pop ballads from the 80s or the latest sing-along anthems from the charts. Currently, a classic disco tune was playing in his head, just waiting to burst out into full-blown performance. A breeze stirred dust on the track's asphalt, and Buck turned his head just in time to see his long-suffering crew chief, Joan Garrett, tapping her watch. She'd told him repeatedly, "Keep your head in the cockpit. No solos mid-lap this time, please." Buck offered a charming grin and a thumbs up, but inwardly, he felt a flutter of anticipation. Singing kept him calm. Without the songs, he was just another maverick behind the wheel. With them, he was unstoppable. Or so he believed. The stands erupted in cheers, draining all other thought from his head. Engines revved, thick plumes of exhaust wafted skyward, and every driver prepared for the first lap. Buck's car rumbled like an impatient Mustang ready to bolt from the stable. The adrenaline surged, but so did that irresistible urge, the high notes from a cheesy love song he'd belted in the shower that morning. Under his breath, Buck began humming, feeling the vibration in his throat. Part of him was aware how ridiculous it was to serenade himself at speeds pushing 200 miles per hour. But that knowledge only added a forbidden thrill. When the green flag finally lashed forward, Buck slammed the pedal and soared ahead. The racetrack fell into that familiar hypnotic routine, a swirl of color, squealing tires, swirling dust. Yet in Buck's world, the swirling dust and screeching rubber provided the perfect beat for a dramatic karaoke session. As he maneuvered toward the first turn, the disco tune he'd been humming blasted into full lyric. "Stayin' Ive," he mouthed, though not audible. The urge trembled on the tip of his tongue, waiting to escape. He pressed the radio button. "Joan, how's my line?" "Buck, you're drifting inside. Watch your apex or you'll spin out." He gripped the wheel and forced himself to concentrate. But when he eased off the radio button, the catchy refrain in his head beckoned him again, urging him to hit the chorus, to let the falsetto fly. God, was it so wrong to want to share a little music with everyone? Buck's penchant for driving and performing started years ago at a small, rickety go-kart track in rural Mississippi. He'd been the type of kid who insisted on playing the radio whenever he hopped on his bike or skateboard. At first, it was just a way to pass time singing his heart out while racing along dusty roads. But soon it became clear that when Buck sang, he also seemed to drive better. Some intangible synergy fused the rhythms of a tune with the rhythms of his steering, braking, and accelerating. He began winning local go-kart races, but that also meant he gained local notoriety for turning warm-up laps into spontaneous karaoke concerts. Eventually, he graduated to stock cars. Racing meant new responsibilities, new sponsors, and stricter track rules, but also bigger crowds, a bigger audience as far as Buck was concerned. He discovered that singing through his helmet microphone drew an odd mix of confusion, annoyance, and fascination from his pit crew. But that never stopped him from belting out a tune whenever he felt the magic spark. His biggest supporter, ironically, was also the person who scolded him the most, Joan Garrett. She was Buck's crew chief and strategist, a woman who lived and breathed racing. She had no patience for nonsense and demanded consistency. But even she couldn't deny that something about Buck's outrageous karaoke stunt made him unique. And as long as the results were there, sponsors looked the other way, even if it meant enduring the occasional serenade of a Sinatra classic in the midst of a hairpin turn. Yet as Buck advanced to higher circuits, crowd expectations soared. Fans adored him for the antics, but his rivals saw the singing as a sign of disrespect or distraction. The tension in the pit lane began to simmer, as the race's first lap concluded, Buck found himself in 5th place. His car hugged the corners gracefully, the engine was purring, tires gripping, everything seemingly perfect. A good time to hum that disco number, he thought. though he knew Joan would have words if she caught wind of it. He tried to stay professional for the next few turns, focusing on his lines, breathing sync with the engine's roar. Then, finishing lap 2, he noticed the track's giant screen, a close-up shot of him from the front, viewers at home possibly seeing his gloved hands gripping the wheel, his eyes shifting with concentration, and the subtle quiver in his lips as he mouthed invisible lyrics. He felt a pang of delight. They would probably talk about it in the post-race coverage. Was Buck Winslow singing again, the commentators would ask? Does he have the strangest pre-race ritual in the league? Or is it part of some secret technique? He smirked. If only they knew that once he started singing aloud, he simply couldn't stop. The second lap bled into the third. The field began to spread out, letting Buck climb a spot. Over the team radio, Joan's voice crackled. "Buck, you're coming up behind number 32 in the next turn. He's slow on the outside. Pass low, and do it quietly, please." He chuckled to himself. The microphone clicked in his ear, reminding him that all radio chatter was monitored by the league. But that didn't discourage him from softly belting a single line. "You can tell by the way I use my walk." He cut himself off when he saw the startled face of the driver he was passing in the adjacent car. That poor soul likely glimpsed Buck's face turned in his direction, half-helmeted, attempting to croon a disco lyric. The man's car swerved momentarily, presumably from shock, giving Buck the opening he needed to vault into fourth place. Meanwhile, in the pit lane, Joan threw her headset onto the console in frustration. "He's going to cause an accident with this karaoke mania," she groaned. Yet she also tried not to smile, because Buck somehow made it work. Even a tiny part of her admitted that his borderline lunatic style of racing kept fans enthralled. Sponsors lined up for him, merchandise with cartoonish depictions of Buck holding a microphone while perched on the hood of his car sold like hotcakes. But there was also an underlying concern. Would the league's officials tolerate this quirk forever? Several had quietly hinted to Joan that if Buck's irreverent style ever caused a safety incident, there would be fines or worse, suspensions. Buck needed to shape up or he might lose his racing privilege. That's why she'd spent the entire week before the big race encouraging him to lay off the show tunes. But once Buck was in that car, the spirit of adrenaline fueling his voice was unstoppable. She could only cross her fingers and hope for the best as the laps ticked by. High up in the stands, fans wore t-shirts that read "Karaoke King" in big bold letters, and waved homemade signs shaped like microphones. They chanted, "Sing it, Buck," at every pass. The phenomenon had grown from a small novelty into a full-fledged brand. Casual viewers might have assumed it was just a publicity stunt, but Buck's longtime supporters knew he genuinely couldn't help it. If you listened closely on quiet practice days, you could hear him in his garage, fiddling with the engine, humming lullabies. It was simply part of who he was. Unbelievably talented, unbelievably eccentric, and unbelievably eager to share both those qualities with the world. Heading into lap 7, Buck discovered a perfect groove on the track. He soared into third place, drafting behind the second-place car, a sleek black machine driven by a stoic competitor named Gavin Hicks. Gavin was the polar opposite of Buck, clinical, reserved, always with a serious scowl in the cockpit. Where Buck might crack a joke or hum a tune, Gavin seldom spoke. So Buck wasn't surprised when the black car held a steady, unwavering line, making it tough for him to pass. Then it happened, the radio fizzed again. Joan calmly gave him instructions. "Wait for him to open a door in turn 4. He tends to brake a fraction earlier there." Buck acknowledged. "Copy that," he whispered. Only he didn't stop with "copy that." Instead, he started singing the next line of his disco anthem. No time to talk. He let the melody roll out, ignoring the beat from Joan that indicated she was about to go ballistic. It was near silent in the cockpit aside from the engine's rumble, but the mental satisfaction of letting the tune flow was priceless. Each syllable danced on his tongue, fueling his confidence. With the next corner, Buck felt synergy between the pulsating disco tempo in his head and the tires meeting the track. He predicted Gavin's braking point precisely, drifted to the inside and shot forward. The move was flawless. He sliced ahead with inches to spare. That microsecond when his car pulled in front of Gavin's, Buck took a quick glance at the rearview mirror. He saw Gavin pounding a fist on the steering wheel in frustration. Buck couldn't resist and softly let out a "ha" that turned into a short crescendo of the tune. The pass put Buck in second place, and the crowd reacted with an ear-splitting roar. Cameras zoomed in, capturing his every move. The streaming broadcast showed the curious shape of his mouth, sometimes parted slightly as though whispering a secret. Although no one beyond his pit crew had the radio feed, the sight was enough to confirm that the Karaoke King was, as usual, singing during the race. The next challenge loomed. First place was held by Talia Raines, a formidable racer known for fearless cornering. She had a golden black livery that glimmered in the midday sun. Talia had publicly criticized Buck in interviews, calling him a clown behind the wheel and insisting her skill would soon put him in his place. But ironically, despite being 2 car lengths behind her, Buck's comedic coping strategy left him feeling supremely confident. He recited lines from the radio's top hits, weaving them into an imaginary setlist in his mind. First up, a recent chart-topping pop ballad about heartbreak, ironically well-suited for a last-lap showdown. Next, a classic rock jam with a pounding chorus. The songs poured in as if on shuffle. He pictured himself on a stage, bright lights overhead, revved engines for percussion. He rarely missed a note in his imagination. By the time he closed the gap to Talia, he was halfway through a dramatic power ballad. Joan's exasperated voice cut in again. "Buck, focus on turn 2. Talia's known for late braking. You've got to time this right." "Roger that," he murmured, though in truth he was barely listening. He was too busy scanning Talia's moves, searching for any sign of error. Finally, halfway through lap 10, she veered slightly wide, leaving an opening on the inside lane. Buck seized it with the precision of a hawk on the hunt. In that exhilarating moment, he belted the final line of his imaginary ballad out, loud, full volume his voice, squeaking a bit over the engine's guttural roar. Talia, clearly startled, glanced over just as Buck's car zipped past. Her astonishment at the sight of a singing driver outmaneuvering her might have well been comedic gold. Now in the lead, Buck just had to maintain his position. The tricky business of controlling the race began. He found a comfortable rhythm, balancing speed with caution. The euphoria of first place sang in his ears, but so did that unstoppable karaoke reel in his mind. He tried to keep it quieter, but occasionally the notes slipped out. He offered a few lines of a bouncy pop chorus while weaving around lapped cars. He sang an old country tune, reminding himself of his Mississippi roots. Somewhere behind him, Talia and Gavin struggled for second and third places, while the rest of the field battled for scraps. But Buck was in the zone, a place where the track and the tune merged into one perfect stream of consciousness. Every apex matched a beat, every gear shift synced with a verse. He never claimed to fully understand how it worked, only that it gave him a sense of unshakable confidence. Of course, not everyone appreciated the impromptu roadshow. In pit lane, officials eyed monitors, expecting trouble at any moment. One official in a crisp polo turned to Joan with a raised eyebrow, as if to say, "Does he even care about the rules?" She shot the official an apologetic look and then tapped her head, said, "Buck, final 5 laps, keep it smooth, don't do anything crazy." "Understood," he said, stifling a giggle at the ludicrousness of it all. The crowd was on its feet. Thousands of camera flashes flickered like strobe lights at a concert. If there was ever a time for one last karaoke flourish, it was now. The next lap flew by. Talia managed to gain on him slightly, her intensity unrelenting. Buck's heart hammered. It was time to push the car to its limit. The new tires gripping the asphalt, the aerodynamics stable, the sun high overhead, the stands roared. Beyond that roar, a single thought popped into his head for a moment: the possibility of a life without singing. Could he ever do this again, without weaving the lyrics of some obscure love song into the white noise? Probably not. This was him at his core, no hiding, no faking. On the second to last lap, Talia threatened an inside pass. Buck angled himself to block, forcing her to lift off the throttle. He used the fraction of time gained to accelerate out of the corner. Adrenaline pumping, he realized he was singing again at the top of his lungs, microphone or not. No matter that the engine's roar drowned him out. He felt the sweet relief of letting each note escape his lungs. Joan's voice crackled again. "She'll try again on the straight, stay wide, then cut in." He repeated the instructions, half singing them to the tune in his head. A grin spread beneath his helmet. If any driver could cross the finish line in first place while belting lyrics, it was Buck Winslow. The final lap sign came into view, white flag flapping. Any minor lack of focus could cost him everything now. The entire racing world held its breath. Talia had one last shot, drafting behind him, capitalizing on the slipstream to attack on the final corner. Buck braced himself, and that was precisely when he decided to let loose. He took a deep breath and crooned the high-pitched final note of his disco jam. Why that note at that time? Perhaps it was the unstoppable surge of energy in his veins. If Tali was going to pass him, she was going to pass him while he was singing. The sound soared from his throat, squeaking almost painfully as the G-forces pressed him into his seat. But something miraculous happened. Talia braked half a second too late, swung wide, and lost her chance. Buck rocketed out of the turn, the finish line beckoning. The checkered flag whipped through the air as Buck's car stormed across the line in first place. A crescendo of cheers thundered around the stadium. Joan exhaled a deep sigh of relief in the pit lane, then allowed herself a grin. Bands in the stands leapt up and down, some waving cardboard microphones, others chanting Karaoke King. The volume was deafening, even though only Buck really knew how loud. For him, the finishing chord of his imaginary performance was the true exclamation point on the victory. He pulled into the victory lane, the adrenaline slowly subsiding. Smoke hissed from the tires as he completed celebratory donuts, the car swirling in patterns across the tarmac. He flicked off the engine, unbuckled his harness, and popped open the door. The press and pit crew rushed around him. Joan came sprinting over, brandishing a water bottle and pointedly ignoring the triumphant grin plastered on his face. She shoved the bottle toward him. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" she teased, though her eyes sparkled with pride. "Not in a million years," Buck replied, taking a swig. In a cacophony of camera shutters, interviewers clamored for his attention. Buck found himself overwhelmed with microphones and handheld recorders. One journalist shouted above the rest, "Was that you singing out there? Did we hear you actually belting a falsetto on the last corner?" Buck loosened the top of his suit, letting in a bit of air. "It may have been me," he replied coyly. "I find a good karaoke tune helps me focus." More questions flew at him. He answered with jokes, casual shrugs, and plenty of twinkling charm. Sponsors lined up to congratulate him, each probably thinking about ways to market the unstoppable singing racer. Meanwhile, Talia stewed in second place, refusing any handshake from Buck's fans. As far as she was concerned, losing to a singing clown was the ultimate humiliation. Gavin claimed third, half amazed and half disgruntled. Later that evening, after the official podium ceremony and trophy presentation, the track hosted a celebratory banquet. Drivers and crews gathered in a large, decorated hall. The chatter about Buck singing dominated every conversation. Some found it hilarious. Others insisted it was a gimmick undeserving of serious racing. But no matter what side they took, everyone seemed to have an opinion. As the night wore on, an unexpected announcement glided over the banquet sound system. "Attention, everyone! We've set up a karaoke machine on the stage for those brave enough to join after dinner." That was all Buck needed to hear. He abandoned his half-eaten dessert and bounded toward the stage like a kid spotting an ice cream truck. Joan, Talia, Gavin, and a few other racers watched from a distance, either out of curiosity or exasperation. Buck scrolled through the machine's library until he found his disco anthem. The music kicked in with a groovy bass line. He grabbed the microphone, eyes sparkling with the confidence of someone who just dominated a high-speed race. Performing in front of a crowd wasn't new for Buck, but it felt surreal to do it without an engine rumbling in the background. As he launched into the opening verse, the chatter in the hall drifted to hush, replaced by scattered applause and laughter. His voice wasn't perfect. It cracked on the high notes from the strain of the race, but it was earnest, energetic, and undeniably fun. By the time he reached the chorus, a few of the more extroverted guests joined him on stage, dancing along, forgetting for a moment that they'd come here to talk strategy and sign sponsor deals. Talia leaned against a table, arms crossed. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, though her foot tapped involuntarily along with the rhythm. Gavin tried to hide an amused snort. Joan, seeing how the crowd responded, finally relaxed. Sometimes letting Buck be Buck was better than any PR blueprint. When the song ended, applause engulfed the stage. Buck bowed dramatically, beads of sweat dripping from his forehead. He hopped off, passing the microphone to the next volunteer. One by one, others got up to sing some well, some badly, but all with bright smiles. Strangely enough, the karaoke phenomenon that once caused friction in the pit lane had now united them in celebration. It may have been silly, but it reminded everyone why they loved the sport. The passion, the fun, the spectacle. As the banquet wound down, Buck wandered outside to catch some fresh air. The stars twinkled above the deserted racetrack, the stands eerily quiet after a day of roaring chaos. Joan followed him out, arms folded for warmth. They stood by the fence overlooking the empty pit lane, the trophy shining under a nearby floodlight. "You did it," Joan said quietly. "Though I have no clue how the league will handle your ongoing habit. The officials might demand you tone it down," Buck chuckled. "It's who I am, Joan. I know it's weird to them, but I can't imagine racing without singing. It's like I'd be missing an engine piston or a tire or something." She smiled. "I get it. That synergy you have on the track, maybe it's your secret weapon." She paused, then nudged him on the shoulder. "Just promise me you'll try not to blast out show tunes at the worst possible moments, okay? Like if you're stuck in a three-wide battle for position." He raised his palms in mock surrender. "No promises, but I'll try to keep it stealthy." After a moment's silence, they both turned to gaze at the darkened grandstands. The memory of the roaring fans still rang in their ears. Buck felt the weight of the trophy in his arms and the gentle ache in his throat from belting out tunes all afternoon. The night air was crisp, carrying faint echoes of victory celebrations from inside the banquet hall. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in a long while. "We've come a long way," he mused. "From that rickety go-kart track to me singing in front of thousands, it's surreal." Joan nodded. "Ready for the next step? There's talk of a bigger championship series next season. More cameras, more interviews, tougher competition." A small grin tugged at his lips. "Bring it on. I've got a repertoire of songs ready to roll. Maybe I should expand into some 80s hair metal next time." She groaned, though not without a spark of humor in her eyes. "Great, because that's exactly what racing needs. Long-hammered screaming solos echoing down the front stretch." Buck laughed, letting the possibility hang in the air. The future was open wide. Challenges, critics, and maybe even official penalties might lie ahead, but while he had breath in his lungs, he would race with a song in his heart. And if that meant occasionally surprising his competitors with a serenade at 200 miles per hour, so be it. Because that, as his fans would say, was simply Buck Winslow, the unstoppable, unpredictable karaoke king of the racetrack.